Welcome back everybody, Broadbent here, and today we are starting a brand new series, Forgotten Concepts for Stranded Deep. The aim of the series is to resurface the long lost concepts and ideas for Stranded Deep that have since been long forgotten in the depths of the ocean. Now I came across all this stuff one night when I was really bored, and I found that there was absolutely tons of ideas and concepts that have never really been discussed. It's crazy how much there is here. Not to mention some really good ideas, so I'm really looking forward to sharing these with you. Now, some of the ideas may have made their way onto an island near you. However, the vast majority of them have still sank to the cold, unforgiving depths. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you think about the designs, so if you see something you'd love or something that you don't, be sure to write an essay in the comments. So the first concept on today's list is a hammock. This artwork first appeared on the Trello page back in November 2015, and it features 6 different designs for makeshift shelters. In the bottom left, you can see the design for the hammock, which looks to be made out of just rope and leaves. After looking at this design for quite some time, I could really see this making its way into the game. It's the only solution I've seen that gets your player up and off the ground for cheap that isn't a big fully fledged base. And we all know how important it is to avoid all those nasty bugs that are all over the ground. Hammocks are well known for their comfort. Comfort, from what I can tell, doesn't exist in the game currently, unless you call this thing comfortable. So with that in mind, maybe there could be other benefits for using it. Maybe less stat depletion overnight, who knows. Now the hammock doesn't just have health benefits, it also looks extremely cheap to build. From what I gathered from the artwork, it looks like it would only take 2 lashing and a palm bunch to craft. However, the kicker would be that you wouldn't be able to build it anywhere. You would need to find the perfect location with 2 trees really close to one another. Now there are 4 other designs on here, number 1, number 2, number 5 and number 6, that are designs for, I guess, like early game shelters. And all of them have different unique properties. Now the first one we're going to talk about is number 1, and now this is, basically the bed is underground. Now I assume the benefit of having your bed slightly underground would reduce the temperature so you'd be cooler at night. Now if the devs tweaked a few things with the climate, I could see that really been an interesting dynamic to the game. So you've got to look at the temperature before you go to bed and choose the appropriate shelter. That sounds really interesting. So this shelter appears to be made out of 3 logs, a bunch of sticks, and some palm fronds. Now what really gets interesting is the hole dug underground. Now in order to dig that hole, you would need what you would call a spade. However, we won't be discussing that in today's video, that's for a later episode. Moving over to number 2, it looks like the same basic concept, however it looks a little bit cheaper to build, a little bit quicker to build, but what you're gaining in time, you're also sacrificing in build quality. This thing does not look like it would last in a storm overnight. Who's to say if you got caught up in a storm, this thing wouldn't blow over and it would wake you up halfway through the night? Just an interesting thought there. Design number 5 looks a lot cheaper to build. Now this design is slightly different because it uses a tree as a support beam. So instead of chopping down the tree, you would just use it as a support. So that would make it much quicker and cheaper to build. You'd have to just find a stick and some palm fronds and you're good to go. The final shelter on this is number 6. Now this I would really like to see in the game because there's nothing quite like it. This shelter looks like it's comprised of 4 logs or sticks and just a bunch of palm fronds with a little bit of lashing. But looking at this design, it looks extremely spacious on the inside. And perhaps on the corners at the very bottom, you've got room for storage. It would be really nice to have this full range of early game structures to choose from. Just while you're setting up a base, this would be really nice. Now, as mentioned previously, this image was first seen on Trello in 2015. However, a few months later in March 2016, they added a shelter into the game in version 0.11. So they might have just scrapped all the ideas here and just merged them into the one shelter. Nonetheless, I still think it'd be really cool to have all the different shapes and sizes for different early game structures. Now also in this image at the top right, there's a design for a simple bed. Here you can see 2 screenshots showing the beds that were actually in the game upon launch. So what I believe's happened here is they've completely removed this design from the game and they've just added the sleeping bags. The sleeping bags have completely replaced them. However, I still feel it's a bit of a grey area. There's no real makeshift bed apart from a full-fledged shelter. And if you've got a base going, you kind of want to move in if you haven't got any leather. So I feel like they should still add this. Would be nice to see some sort of primitive bed once again. I feel like that's sort of a grey area. It's not really covered in the game. So next up on today's list is the in-game map, a holdable item that will display all the islands in your world. Now this concept was first thrown up on the Trello board back in February 2015. Quite a while ago. Now, the idea of an in-game map wasn't brought up again until all the way over in November 2017, which was quite recent. The idea was moved from general feature ideas to large feature ideas in November 2017. A few months later, in February 2018, the devs tweeted out this picture, saying, "What do you think? Should we add a map?" Now, as you expect, the response was phenomenal. This tweet got over 176 likes. The Trello board has over 373 votes as well. So this is definitely a feature that the community wants to see. And by the looks of this image, it looks almost ready to go. Now, whether you would have to find this item or craft it is pretty much anyone's guess. But looking closer at the details of this map here, you can see as you discover shipwrecks and things on islands, it shows up on the map, which I think is really cool. It's always nice to keep track of, say, where you've got some tires and things like that. Now, here's a little food for thought. If you can have a map, why couldn't you find, say, a treasure map? So just after the devs tweeted this photo, and it's got an amazing response, a month later, they moved it to the roadmap section on the Trello page, which means it is definitely planned and it is in the future. So I don't know when, but we should expect this pretty darn soon. So back in June 2016, this concept art cropped up, which contains a bunch of different designs for spear guns. Now, strictly speaking, these are all spear gun designs. However, I feel some of these designs could be used elsewhere. So at the very bottom here, we do have the air canister spear gun that we have in the game today. This has been fully modeled and is functioning pretty much as it looks right here in the concept art. However, we don't have the little rope attaching to the arrows. So we're not going to be focusing on that bottom design, we can just dismiss that. We're going to be focusing on the crossbow and the sort of makeshift spear gun right here. Now, these two bottom ones are pretty much the same concept, they're just a little bit different here and there with the design. Nothing too drastic, one's got a trigger, one's got a more primitive release system. But they are both spear guns designed for the early game. And I feel like that is a bit of an empty spot right now, because currently you have to throw spears. There's no sort of middle ground with the spear guns. So the difference between these two designs here, the crossbow style and the rubber tube design, is that the rubber tube design is a little bit more narrow, right? It's got less resistance being used underwater. I think this would work great as a spear gun. However, the crossbow design, I feel, has more use on land. As you can imagine, this crossbow would most likely deal more damage than the bow and arrow. It would definitely make hunting boars just a little bit easier. So I feel like a crossbow really isn't that far-fetched. To make it, all you would need is maybe just a few sticks and maybe some planks to make the crossbow limbs, and then basically just some rope and maybe a knife to carve out the groove for the arrow. This would make a great addition to the game. Let me know what you think to this in the comments below. But I definitely think the crossbow has more use above ground, as it's got a little bit more resistance underwater. It's gonna have more punch up above ground. Now for the rubber, I assume you would be able to salvage that from the tires laying around. Not sure if that's gonna be the right type of rubber. Maybe you'd be able to salvage it from some of the forts laying around. More on that in a future video. But I really do like this idea, and I'm trying to think why they wouldn't have added this to the game. And I guess it's because we've already got the compressed air spear gun. But I still feel like there's a bit of an empty spot with early game projectile-based weapons. Now for the final topic on today's video, we're going to be talking about Craftable Oars. This artwork was posted to the Trello page on May the 3rd, 2016, and this was the first and last we ever saw of this concept. Now this image features 5 different designs for craftable oars. Now they all vary in size and functionality, and they also use quite a few different materials. Now currently in the game we do have the paddle, which you have on the life raft after crashing into the ocean. However, I feel like the main reason this is now currently needed in the game is because the devs have been talking about making a multiplayer. Now there's already couch mode multiplayer, which is basically split screen co-op, and you only have one paddle. Now as for the custom rafts, these paddles don't really apply, but I feel like they could. Now looking at these paddles, they all have one thing in common. The handles are extremely short. So these paddles might not work very well with some of the custom rafts that you can build, but if you were to sort of build your raft with using a paddle in mind, for example, you could build a 1x2 raft, like a small little dinghy, and you could use the middle oar as a solo player and get some really good speeds. The main reason why I feel this is relevant now is because of the multiplayer that's potentially coming out soon. I know they've already released the couch mode, and I'm 90% sure they're working on online multiplayer. So a craftable oar would be a nice way to get around on your raft other than just using the sail and motor. Alright everyone, so thank you so much for watching Stranded Deep Forgotten Concepts Episode 1. In Episode 2, we will be discussing abandoned bunkers, hatches, the bolt-action rifle, and barbed wire. Make sure to tune in next episode to hear all about them and how they would work in the Stranded Deep world. If you haven't already, make sure to press the like button on this video to help support the channel. If you liked what you see and you're not already, make sure to get subscribed. So thank you so much for watching everyone, and I will catch you in the next video.